when I got back the first time, Dave said, so, bit of a Turkish delight there. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, you were shaking around all over the place. And he said, but what was really funny was when they tried to get you into the ambulance, because you didn't want to go. And then he started telling me what was happening. So after the second one, he comes back and he goes, well, I come back from or he comes into the hospital and I go, well, see, you've had another quick trip around the room. So my seizures, when I had them, have been referred to as, well, Turks actually, because Turkish delight has 4 syllables and Australians will minimise it if they can. So people still say, have you had any Turks lately? Have you had a quick trip around the room? That's the way they talk to me about it. So anyway, it turned out that I had the second seizure. So now we come to the next part of the story. My mother. My mother is Catholic and Irish. When I was born, she did like every good mother did in the mid-1950s, and she went and bought the Home Medical Journal. So she researched what had happened to me in the Home Medical Journal. She loaded herself up with various medallions and saints' cards and things, and she drove down to where I was living south of Perth, and she said, here's a St. Jude medal because he's for hopeless causes, and here's a St. Luke because he's the patron saint of physicians, and here's St. Christopher, and I know he's not a saint anymore, but you should have a St. Christopher medal with you anyway, and here's one of Mary, and here's another set of rosary beads in case you've lost your other one, and you should get your affairs in order because I researched it and you've got a brain tumour and you're going to die in 3 months. Going, well, thanks, Mum. I'm feeling really good. Awesome. Love the outlook. Really, really good. So anyway, what happened from there? And you need to understand this is the second time that I have actually spoken about being epileptic in my life. We found out through a lot of coercion that I had a great uncle who was an epileptic, and being Catholic, the family, Irish Catholic, they were on a farm. He was never allowed in off the farm because he was possessed. They had actually tried to have the demons exorcised from him several times and it didn't work. And so my grandparents, even though their rational mind said one thing, their historical mind and their conditioning through their culture said another. He's possessed. People have said that about me at other times, I think, haven't they? Yeah, well, it's like, yeah, thank you, Angel. Thank you, Angel. So we couldn't get very much information from them. And then, within a few years, they had passed, and any connection that we had to any sort of family history was gone. So I had the tests and things, and it turned out that I was idiopathic, which means they haven't got a clue why it happened. It's just the nice big phrase that they do. So I hid it. It was embarrassing. Now, I was lucky. I was well controlled. I had what was called nowadays tonic-clonic upon awakening. So if I'm going to have a seizure, I'm going to have a seizure within the first hour of waking up. So all I did was what I'd done all of my life. I used to get up and go down the beach and go for a surf. So all I did is I got up, didn't go for a surf, waited for an hour, and I've done that all my life. I'm up an hour and a half before I do anything. So that was all fine until I started teaching at this school, and I got called in by the principal. There was a secret meeting. And there was these 2 parents there, and no one was allowed in except the principal, but he insisted that I come in because I was teaching phys ed. And they said, our daughter has just been diagnosed with epilepsy. No one is allowed to know. And the principal had insisted that I come in because one of the things our school had was a swimming pool. And he did say to the parents, it's probably a good idea he knows this, because if she has a seizure in the swimming pool, you're going to need to be aware about that. So I sat there and I listened to these parents and I said, what's the big secret? And they couldn't really put a finger on it, but they were just, it is a secret. And I said, you guys wouldn't know an epileptic if they were sitting across the bloody table from you. And my principal started looking at me because he didn't know either. And eventually we got to the point and I said, I have epilepsy, all right? I'm relatively normal. The only thing I'd had to do, the only thing I'd had, this is what you do when you have people you know. So there was my first output and admission of epilepsy. I still kept it hidden. I got engaged, I got married. My wife knew that I had epilepsy. She didn't know the reality of it until I had a seizure one morning. And within a number of months after the seizure, we had separated because she simply couldn't handle what she saw when I had a seizure. Now, you actually need to understand here, even with modern cell phones, I've never seen it. I just provide the entertainment, so I've never actually seen it. So I'm not grossed out by it, I just know I feel tired. And the other thing, I'm understanding myself a little bit now. I used to be so terribly disappointed in myself that my body had let me down. And it wasn't so much I was tired, it wasn't that I'd bitten my tongue, it wasn't that. It's like I've let myself down, and I had to grow past that. I got to Canada, and my wife said, well, where's your medic alert bracelet? I'm going, I don't wear one, I don't want anyone to know. So very shortly after, because I do what my wife tells me to do, I got a medic alert bracelet. And I started to mention to a few people. I hadn't even told my employer that I had epilepsy, which was not a good thing when I had a seizure at a school one day, because then they sort of worked it out. But probably the toughest thing that happened, and this is where I owe a great deal of gratitude to my wife and daughters, is over a period of 3 days, I had, how many? 6. I had 6 seizures over a period of 3 days. I kept waking up in the ambulance going, yo, we're back here again. Yeah, you had a seizure. Oh, really? Didn't I just have one this morning? Yeah, you had another one. And then I started to recall back to my mother, going, you have a brain tumour, you have, well, 6, you've probably got minutes to live. And that was when and in the course of those seizures, it was very difficult for my girls and my wife to watch. At one point, I did fall on my back, and I was frothing and choking a little bit, and so my older daughter, Kendra, put me into a recovery position. Thank God she didn't try and jam something down my tongue. You can't actually swallow your tongue, by the way. Olivia found it really difficult. When I eventually got my license back, Olivia was scared to be in the car with me for quite a while in case I had a seizure. What it turned out was I had been given an antibiotic at the hospital when I went in with a stomach condition that cancelled out my anticonvulsants. The lesson I learned there, and anyone who takes any medication you need to learn, you go to your pharmacist and say, are there any contraindications? So I trusted the doctor, and this is pharmacology 101. You should know that Cipral and anticonvulsants don't work. It was my pharmacist who actually solved the mystery. The doctors couldn't work out why I was having them. I was heading to Toronto for brain scans. I was going everywhere. And my pharmacist said, well, duh. And it happened to be a long weekend and that pharmacy was closed, so I'd filled it at the hospital. So why am I telling you this story? Because 1 in 5 people in Ontario, apparently, suffer from some form of epilepsy. That's 20% of us. Somewhere in this room there may be some of you. You may know people. It may not be the big tonic-clonic, full-blown, roll around the room, bite your tongue stuff that I get to enjoy. It could be the absent seizure. It could be the looking off into space. It could be little things, but it's really common. And my wife every year runs a fundraiser. And this year the fundraiser was for Epilepsy Simcoe. And it was based on one of her clients whose 24-year-old son had a seizure and died in his sleep, died during the seizure while he was asleep. So I decided it's about time that I stood up and I said, you know what, I've got epilepsy, I do have the seizures. I had to make a couple of changes in my life, but I am having a full and happy life, and you can too, because I've met people who just find it such a devastating diagnosis. You can enjoy yourself. It has not stopped me. And what I'm happy about now is I'm actually standing up to people saying, yep, I have epilepsy, it's okay. Thank you.